At the will reading, my parents laughed at my $10 inheritance. Then the lawyer handed me a letter. The conference room smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper, the kind of scent law offices use to convince you everything inside is orderly, even when your life isn't. I sat at the far end of the table with my hands folded in front of me, not because I was trying to look composed. It was the only posture that kept me from doing something unhelpful with my fingers, picking at a cuticle, tapping, reaching for my phone. I had already checked the time twice in the lobby, watched the second hand drag itself around the clock like it was carrying weight. Across from me, my parents sat side by side as if they were attending a fundraiser. My mother wore her pearl studs and a cream blazer, the kind of outfit she reserved for church and anything involving witnesses. She kept her posture tall, chin lifted, lips pressed into a practiced line that suggested sympathy without the inconvenience of feeling it. My father leaned back with one ankle resting on his opposite knee, scrolling on his phone with the confidence of a man who expected the universe to apologize for minor inconveniences. Every few seconds, he sighed like we were wasting his afternoon. To my left sat my younger brother, Connor, in a blue suit that still had the crease lines from the department store. He looked good in it. That was always part of the problem. Connor had the kind of face people trusted. It wasn't earned, it was just there. And then there was me, not dressed down, not dressed up, just a dark button-down clean jeans and shoes that didn't squeak. I'd come straight from work because taking a day off felt unnecessary. My boss had nodded when I told her where I was going, like she'd already guessed my family would be exactly what they were. The attorney entered without drama, mid-50s, silver hair, glasses he adjusted with one finger like he'd done it so many times it had become a punctuation mark. He carried a manila folder that looked thicker than it needed to be. "Thank you for coming," he said, taking his seat. "I'm Daniel Mercer. I'm representing the estate of Evelyn Parker." Evelyn Parker! My grandmother. My mother's shoulders softened a fraction, as if she'd been waiting for someone official to say the name out loud. Connor looked down at the table, a quick performance of grief. My father didn't look up from his phone. I did. My grandmother had been the one person in my family who didn't treat patience like weakness. She used to say, "Quiet doesn't mean empty, it means you're listening." When she died, the house had gone silent in a way that felt mechanical, like a machine losing power. Her absence didn't make people kinder, it just made them more efficient. Mercer opened the folder, slid out a document, and set it flat on the table as if it were a placemat. "I'll keep this straightforward," he said. "This is a formal reading of Miss Parker's will and related directives. You'll each receive copies. Some of this may be unexpected." Connor's eyes flicked up at the word unexpected. My mother's mouth tightened as if she'd already decided it wouldn't apply to her. Mercer began with the basics. Funeral costs already covered. Outstanding bills. The legal language that made a human life sound like a list of items being cleared from a shelf. Then he moved to bequests. "Personal effects," he said. "Household items, jewelry, photographs." My mother nodded when he mentioned her receiving the diamond bracelet my grandmother wore on holidays. She didn't smile. She just looked satisfied, as if the universe had corrected itself. My father finally put his phone down when Mercer read the section about the property. "The residence on Hawthorne Lane," Mercer said, "is to be sold. Proceeds are to be distributed as follows." My mother's breath lifted at the word distributed. Connor sat forward slightly, my father's hands folded on the table, suddenly attentive. I didn't move. The last time my grandmother and I spoke, 2 weeks before she went into hospice, she had asked me about my rent, not in a prying way, in a practical way. "Do you feel trapped there?" she'd asked. "No," I'd told her. "It's fine." She'd watched me for a long moment, like she could hear what I wasn't saying. Mercer read the distributions. A percentage to my mother, a percentage to my father, a larger share to Connor. It wasn't a surprise to anyone, but maybe Mercer. He paused briefly, as if expecting a reaction. My mother exhaled through her nose, a sound that was almost a laugh. My father reached for his phone again, already mentally spending. Connor's expression stayed respectful, but the corners of his mouth pulled up the smallest amount. Not triumph. Something closer to confirmation. Mercer continued down the page. "And to Lucas Parker," he said, finally saying my name, "a bequest in the amount of $10. The room didn't react at first, not because they didn't hear him, because their brains took a second to process the absurdity. Then my mother let out a short laugh. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, like a fork hitting glass. $10? she said, turning toward me as if she expected me to share the joke. My father laughed too, bigger, more careless. "Well," he said, tapping the table, "looks like you made out like a bandit." Connor covered his mouth with his hand, pretending to cough. His eyes stayed on the table, but I could see the smile he didn't bother to fully hide. Mercer's face remained neutral. Lawyers learn how to be furniture. My mother leaned closer, voice softer but no less public. "Lucas, honey, I'm sure she meant well. You know how your grandmother was, dramatic, symbolic." She said symbolic the way people say charity. My father shrugged. "You always were the independent one," he added. "Guess she figured you didn't need much. Independent." That was their favorite word for neglect. It sounded better than sidelined. I looked down at the table. The wood had little scratches near the edge, probably from people tapping pens while waiting for other people's decisions to become their problems. In my head, a timeline ran automatically, like it always did when something didn't fit. My grandmother paid for Connor's first car. She had helped my parents with property taxes 1 year when my father's business transition became a 6-month vacation. She had slipped envelopes into my mother's purse with cash for emergencies. She had also called me every Sunday evening for the last 8 years, not when it was convenient. Every Sunday. She asked about my work, about my health, about whether I was eating properly. She never asked about Connor's job because Connor didn't keep one long enough for it to matter. $10 didn't match the person who set reminders on her calendar to make sure I'd had my oil changed. My mother laughed again, still looking at me.
"Don't make that face! It's not the end of the world!"
$10 is $10. My father leaned back. "We can buy you lunch," he said. "Maybe even splurge and get you a soda." Connor finally looked up. His eyes met mine for a second, and then he glanced away like he'd done something generous by not laughing harder. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, because words were the currency my family used to turn facts into noise. If I defended myself, they'd say I was bitter. If I asked why, they'd say I was entitled. If I laughed along, they'd say I'd finally learned to take a joke. So I stayed still. Mercer cleared his throat. "There is an additional item," he said. My father's eyebrows lifted slightly, interest returning. My mother's smile faded into something watchful. Connor's posture straightened. Mercer reached into the folder again and pulled out a single envelope. It was old-looking, not antique, but not fresh. Cream-colored paper, my grandmother's handwriting across the front in careful block letters. To Lucas. Only Lucas. Mercer didn't hand it to my mother, didn't place it in the center of the table. He turned, held it out to me directly, and waited until I took it. It felt heavier than paper should. My mother's eyes narrowed. "What is that? A letter?" Mercer said simply, "Miss Parker left it with instructions."
"It is to be given to Lucas at the reading of the will, unopened."
My father scoffed. "Of course," he muttered. More drama. Connor leaned forward like he could read it from where he sat. My mother's voice took on that gentle tone she used when she wanted control without appearing to demand it. "Lucas, let me see. If it's legal paperwork, we should understand what it is." Mercer lifted a hand. "It is not addressed to anyone else." My mother's mouth tightened. She didn't like being told no in front of people. I turned the envelope over once. The flap was sealed. My grandmother's handwriting didn't shake. It looked like she'd written it when she was clear and deliberate. $10. A private letter. It didn't add up. My father chuckled, trying to take the edge off being corrected by a lawyer. "Open it," he said. "Let's see what wisdom she left you. Maybe she wrote you a poem about being humble." Connor smiled again, quick and bright. "Yeah," he said. "Read it out loud." "For closure." My mother tilted her head, studying me like I was a problem she could solve with the right tone. "We're family, Lucas. There shouldn't be secrets." There it was. The word family, the excuse for everything. I looked at Mercer. He met my eyes and then glanced briefly at the envelope, like even he understood this wasn't just sentimental. Then I looked back at my parents. I could have opened it right there. I could have read it out loud, given them exactly what they wanted, either a punchline or a performance. Instead, I slid the envelope into my inner jacket pocket and closed my hand over it for a second. "I'll read it later," I said. My mother blinked. "Later?" "Yes." Connor's smile thinned. "Why?" We're here. Because, I said, calm, it's addressed to me. My father snorted. Oh, now we're doing boundaries. Cute. My mother's eyes hardened, but her voice stayed smooth. Lucas, don't be difficult. If there's something important about the estate, about assets, we need to know. Mercer spoke before I did. Ms. Parker's instructions were explicit. My mother's jaw worked once, like she was chewing her response. She didn't argue with Mercer, she just looked at me as if she'd memorize the moment and use it later. Connor leaned back again, a little annoyed now that the entertainment had paused. My father picked up his phone, already bored with anything that didn't directly benefit him. Mercer continued with a few more administrative points, signatures, next steps. I listened, took the copy he handed me, and placed it neatly into my folder. I nodded the date at the top. I nodded the notary seal. I nodded the distribution language. Receipts, even when you don't know what you'll need them for yet. When we stood to leave, my mother touched my elbow lightly, light enough to look caring, firm enough to claim ownership. Don't do anything rash, she said quietly, for my ears only. People will talk. Your grandmother's gone. The way you handle this matters. I nodded once, not agreeing, not arguing. My father walked ahead, already calling someone, voice loud as he recounted the numbers. Connor followed them, glancing back at me once like he was still waiting for me to crack. I waited until they were halfway down the hall before I reached into my jacket and pressed my fingers against the envelope again. The paper was warm from my body heat. Whatever was inside, my grandmother had made sure it came to me in front of witnesses. She had also made sure they couldn't take it. I didn't open it in the hallway. I didn't open it in the parking lot. I didn't open it while my mother watched from the passenger seat of my father's car as they pulled out, still laughing like the story was over. I got into my own car, put the folder on the passenger seat, and drove home in silence. When I finally sat at my kitchen table, the envelope in front of me, I noticed something I hadn't seen earlier. In the lower left corner, beneath my name, my grandmother had written 3 small words. Not part of the address. Not decoration. Do not trust them. I stared at that line until the room felt even quieter. Then I slid a letter opener under the seal, careful not to tear the paper, and I opened it. The paper inside the envelope was folded into thirds, the way my grandmother always folded things she wanted to feel deliberate, not rushed, not casual. I unfolded it slowly, smoothing it flat on my kitchen table. The overhead light hummed. My fridge clicked on and off like it was listening. Her handwriting filled both sides of the page. Blue ink, steady lines. Lucas, if you are reading this, then I am no longer able to answer your questions myself. I am sorry for that. I would have preferred to sit across from you with tea and let you decide what to do next. But your parents would not have allowed that. I read the first paragraph twice, not because it was complicated, because it was precise. I left you $10 in the will on purpose. It is not a mistake. It is not a joke. It is not because I valued you less. It is because I needed to make sure you would receive this letter in front of them. My chest didn't tighten. It settled, like something clicking into place. I kept reading. There are things about my finances and my property that your parents and Connor do not know. There are also things they believe they know that are not true. I am asking you to be patient. Do not confront them. Do not warn them. Do not show this letter to anyone yet. She had underlined yet. In the lockbox in my bedroom closet, behind the false panel on the left wall, you will find a flash drive and a folder labeled Hawthorne. The key is taped under the second drawer of my sewing table. If the box is gone, check the vent behind the washing machine in the basement. I moved at once when your father started asking questions. I pushed my chair back slightly. My grandmother had been planning, quietly, carefully, the way she did everything. The contents explain why I did what I did. They also explain why I trusted you to handle it without turning it into a spectacle. I almost smiled at that line. Almost. Whatever you decide, protect yourself first. You were always the one who noticed when things didn't add up. Love, Grandma. I folded the letter back along the same lines and sat there for a full minute without moving. Then I stood up and got my jacket. My parents still had a key to my grandmother's house. They'd made a show of helping clear things out even before the funeral. My mother had called it organizing. My father had called it preventing theft. I called it first access. The drive to Hawthorne Lane took 20 minutes. The house sat on a quiet street, with old maples and mailboxes that leaned like they were tired of standing up. My grandmother's porch light was still burned out. She'd always said she liked the dark. It let her see who was approaching. I parked a block away. Not because I expected them to be there, because I didn't want my car to announce me if they were. The spare key was still under the stone by the flower bed. I didn't like that it was still there. It meant no one had bothered to change anything yet. It meant they thought everything inside already belonged to them. The house smelled like dust and lemon cleaner. My mother's signature scent in every space she helped. The sewing table was still in my grandmother's bedroom, exactly where it had always been, pushed against the wall near the window. I dropped to one knee and ran my fingers under the second drawer. The key was taped there. 2 pieces of old masking tape, yellowed at the edges. The lockbox was behind the false panel, just like she said, a small metal box heavier than it looked. I didn't open it in the house. I put it in my backpack and left. Back at my apartment, I set the box on the table and opened it. Inside was a manila folder and a black flash drive. The folder was thick, not just paper. Copies, originals, notes in the margins in my grandmother's handwriting. The first page was a property deed. Not the Hawthorne Lane house, another address, industrial zoning, a warehouse district near the river. I flipped the page. Bank statements, a trust document, a lease agreement with a logistics company I recognized from the side of trucks on the highway. My grandmother had owned a commercial property, and she hadn't told anyone. The trust document listed her as the sole trustee. The beneficiary was listed as Lucas Parker. Not my parents, not Connor, me. The numbers in the margins weren't dramatic. They were steady, monthly lease income, maintenance costs, taxes, net revenue. I opened my laptop and started a spreadsheet. Dates, amounts, account numbers. I matched the deposits in the bank statements to the lease payments in the agreement. They lined up. My grandmother hadn't been wealthy in the way my parents liked to display wealth. She had been stable, quietly profitable, patient. Then I found the emails, printed copies, clipped together. From my father to my grandmother. Subject lines like, quick question, just checking in, family matter. I read them in order. He had asked about selling the Hawthorne house, about her estate planning, about whether she'd considered simplifying things for everyone. Then the tone shifted. One email stood out. Mom, Connor and I talked. It doesn't make sense for you to keep managing these things yourself. We can take that burden off you. I've got a contact who can handle the paperwork. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. It's family. Let us help. My grandmother's reply was short. I am not a burden. I am capable. Please, stop asking. There were more emails after that, my father pushing, my grandmother refusing. Then a printed voicemail transcript. My father's words typed out. You're being stubborn, Mom. This isn't about control. This is about making sure what you've built stays in the family. Connor understands that. Lucas doesn't even know what to do with money. I closed my eyes for a second. There it was. The assumption. The story they told themselves about me. At the back of the folder was a notarized document, a will amendment, dated 6 months before my grandmother went into hospice. It listed the commercial property and its trust as separate from the primary estate. It included a clause. In the event of dispute, inquiry, or contest by any heir, all records related to the trust are to be released to Lucas Parker and to my legal counsel. She had built a trigger into the system. I sat back in my chair and looked at the flash drive. I didn't plug it in yet. Instead, I scanned everything in the folder. Every page. Every note. Every email. I saved it to a cloud account my family didn't know about and a hard drive I kept in a locked drawer at work. Then I checked the public property records for the warehouse. My grandmother's name was on the deed. No liens, no transfers. But when I checked the utility accounts, I saw something interesting. The billing contact had been changed 3 months ago to my father's email address. I didn't call him. I didn't text.
I made a note. Over the next 2 weeks, my parents' confidence grew.
My mother called me once to tell me they were taking care of the house sale. She didn't ask if I wanted anything from my grandmother's belongings. She told me what they were donating. Connor posted a photo on Instagram in a new car. Caption, big things coming. My father sent a group text about a family dinner to celebrate a fresh start. I went. They talked openly at the table. Numbers. Plans. My mother mentioned renovations. My father talked about investments. Connor joked about finally being the responsible one. No one mentioned the warehouse. No one mentioned the trust, which meant they didn't know. Yet. I kept working. I called the logistics company leasing the property, posed as my grandmother's assistant, confirmed payment schedules, asked about any recent contact. They told me my father had called asking about transferring billing responsibilities. I thanked them and hung up. That night, I finally plugged in the flash drive. It contained audio files, dated, labeled, recordings of phone calls, my grandmother's voice, my father's voice, my mother in the background sometimes prompting. In one file, my father laughed and said, "Once the house sells, the rest will fall into place. Lucas won't even notice." I sat there with my hands folded again, the way I had in the lawyer's office. The key receipt wasn't just paper, it was their own voices. Their own assumptions, their own timeline. I copied the files, backed them up twice, created a folder with dates, summaries, and transcripts. Then I checked the trust document again. The next lease payment was due in 4 days, and the deposit account listed didn't belong to my grandmother anymore. It had been changed to an account in my father's name. I stared at the screen for a long moment. They had found something. They just hadn't realized what it triggered. I closed my laptop and set my phone face down on the table. The family dinner my mother planned, the one she called a celebration, was scheduled for the same day the lease payment would hit. They thought they were about to toast their success. I let them. And I kept everything ready. The dinner was set for Friday at 7. My mother sent the invitation in the family group chat, like it was a calendar event instead of a performance. Dress nice. We're celebrating new beginnings. She added a champagne emoji. My father responded with a thumbs up. Connor replied with a gif of someone clinking glasses. I didn't respond at all. Instead, I spent the morning at work printing documents. Not all of them. Just enough. I arranged them into 3 slim folders, each with a clear plastic cover. On the front of each, I wrote a date and time in pen. Not titles, not accusations, just markers. Then I emailed Mercer, short, polite, specific. Mr. Mercer, I have reason to believe there has been unauthorized contact with and attempted redirection of funds related to a trust established by my grandmother, Evelyn Parker. There is a family gathering scheduled tonight where I expect this to become relevant. If possible, I would appreciate your presence or that of a representative. Lucas Parker, he replied an hour later. I will attend. That was all. The lease payment posted at 2:13 p.m. I got the notification on my phone while I was in the copy room, the printer humming like it didn't care about anyone's problems. The funds didn't land in my father's account. They didn't land in my grandmother's old account either. They bounced. The logistics company had flagged the change request as incomplete and frozen the transfer pending verification from the trustee, which legally was still my grandmother, which, per the trust document, meant Mercer. I took a screenshot. Time, amount, status. Then I forwarded it to Mercer. My parents' house looked different at night. Every light was on. The front windows glowed warm, like something inside was supposed to feel welcoming. My mother had lined the walkway with those small solar lamps that cast more shadow than light. I parked on the street this time, no hiding. I carried 1 folder under my arm. The other 2 stayed in my backpack. Inside, the house smelled like garlic and wine and something sweet baking in the oven. My mother believed in sensory persuasion. If people were comfortable, they were easier to steer. Connor was already there, leaning against the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone. He wore a blazer over a t-shirt. Casual success. Look who made it, he said when he saw me. $10 error himself. My mother shot him a look that was supposed to be playful, but wasn't. Connor. What? He said. It's funny. I hung my jacket on the back of a chair and didn't respond. My father emerged from the dining room with a bottle of wine. There he is, he said. Come on, Lucas. Loosen up. It's a good night. I nodded once. The table was set with their good plates, the ones they only used when guests were involved. Candles, cloth napkins, everything arranged to look effortless. There were guests. My aunt and uncle sat on one side, halfway through a glass of wine. My mother's friend Marissa was there too, the one who worked in real estate and liked to drop words like portfolio and equity into casual conversation. Connor's girlfriend sat next to him, smiling at everything, like she was still learning the script. Mercer wasn't there yet. We ate. My mother told stories about managing the estate. My father talked about family investments. Connor chimed in with jokes about being the responsible one now. No one looked at me when they said these things. Marissa leaned toward me at one point. "So, Lucas," she said, voice light, "what are you going to do with your inheritance?" Connor laughed before I could answer. I took a sip of water. "I'm still deciding." My father raised his glass. "Two options," he said. They all clinked. The doorbell rang. My mother stood up immediately. "I'll get it." Mercer stepped in a moment later, raincoat over his arm, briefcase in hand. The room changed. Not dramatically, just enough. My father's smile tightened. My mother's eyebrows lifted in a way that suggested confusion and irritation at the same time. "Daniel," she said. "What a surprise." "Good evening," Mercer replied. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Of course not," my mother said quickly. "We were just having dinner." "I was invited," Mercer said, looking at me. I pulled out a chair for him. We finished eating. The conversation stumbled now. My father tried to steer it back to light topics. Sports. Weather. Traffic. Connor checked his phone more than usual. When dessert came out, Mercer set his fork down and folded his hands. "Before anyone leaves," he said, "there is a matter that needs to be addressed." My mother laughed softly. "Daniel, really? Tonight?" "Yes," he said. My father leaned back in his chair. "What's this about?" Mercer looked at me. I slid the folder onto the table and pushed it toward the center. "This," I said. Everyone looked at it. Connor's girlfriend leaned forward, curious. Marissa tilted her head. My aunt and uncle stopped mid-bite. My mother smiled, like she was about to manage a situation. "Lucas, if this is about the will, we've already gone over everything." Mercer opened the folder. The first page was the bounced lease payment screenshot. Date, time, amount, status. He turned it so everyone could see. "This is a commercial lease payment," Mercer said, "for a property owned by a trust established by Evelyn Parker." My father frowned. "I don't know what that is." Mercer nodded. "I expected you to say that." He pulled out the trust document and placed it on top. "Parker owned a warehouse property near the river," he continued. "It has been generating monthly lease income for several years. That income is directed to a trust. The beneficiary of that trust is Lucas." The table went quiet. Connor's smile disappeared completely. My mother's hand tightened around her fork. "That's not possible," my father said. "We would have known." Mercer slid out the email printouts. "You asked about it," he said. Repeatedly. My mother stood up. "This is inappropriate. You're bringing legal matters into a family dinner." "This became a legal matter," Mercer replied, "when someone attempted to redirect trust funds without authorization." Connor looked at my father. "Dad?" My father's face flushed.
I was just handling billing. They asked for a contact.
Mercer nodded. "And you provided your own bank account." My aunt let out a small sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a cough. Marissa sat back in her chair slowly, like she wanted distance from the table. My mother looked at me now, not Mercer. "You knew about this?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "How long?" "Long enough?" Connor pushed his chair back. "This is insane! You're accusing our parents of stealing." "I'm not accusing anyone," I said. "I'm showing what happened." Mercer opened his briefcase and took out a tablet. He tapped the screen once. My grandmother's voice filled the room. "Once the house sells, the rest will fall into place. Lucas won't even notice." My father's voice, "You're good with money," recorded. Connor's girlfriend covered her mouth with her hand. My mother sank back into her chair. The recording stopped.
Mercer looked around the table. "Ms.
Parker anticipated this possibility," he said, "which is why she structured the trust the way she did. Any attempt to interfere triggers full disclosure." My father stood up. "Turn that off." "No," Mercer said. My father pointed at me. "You planned this!" I shook my head. "She did." My mother's voice was low now. "Lucas, this is a misunderstanding. We were trying to protect you. You don't know how to manage something like this. I opened my backpack and took out the second folder. Inside were the spreadsheets, the timelines, the scanned documents. I've been managing it for 3 weeks, I said. The lease, the maintenance account, the tax escrow. It's not complicated, it's just quiet. Connor stared at the table. Mercer checked his watch. At this point, he said, I am required to report the attempted redirection of funds. The logistics company has already frozen the account. Any further contact from unauthorized parties will be documented. My father looked around the room, at my aunt, at Marissa, at Connor's girlfriend, at people who would remember this. This didn't need to be public, he said. It did, Mercer replied. That was also in Miss Parker's instructions. My mother reached for my hand. I moved it away gently. We can talk about this later, she said. Privately. I nodded. We will. Mercer gathered his documents. I'll be in touch, he said to me. He stood, nodded to the table, and left. No one spoke. For a long moment, the candles burned low. Finally, my father picked up his glass, realized it was empty, and set it back down. Connor stood and walked out of the room without a word. My mother sat very still. I closed my folders and put them back in my bag. I'll go too, I said. At the door, my mother called my name. I turned. Her voice was careful now, measured. You didn't have to do it like this. I met her eyes. Neither did you. I stepped outside. Behind me, through the window, I could see them still sitting at the table, surrounded by plates and candles and the version of the night they thought they were having. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Mercer. The logistics company has requested a formal meeting. They want the trustee and beneficiary present. Monday at 10 a.m., I looked up at the dark street, the quiet houses, the porch lights that stayed on or didn't. Monday wasn't just a meeting. It was where the paperwork became permanent. I put my phone away and walked to my car, already thinking about what boundaries looked like when they weren't just words, and how much of my family would still be standing on the other side of them when this was over. Monday morning, the law office smelled the same as it had during the will reading, lemon cleaner and old paper, but this time the space felt different. It was no longer about ceremony. It was about facts. I tell them to ask you a passage or structure, accountability. I arrived early, briefcase in hand, folders carefully stacked, receipts already verified twice. Mercer was already there, setting up chairs around a conference table. I didn't wait for anyone else. The office was quiet, empty, calm. That was how I liked it. Calm before a storm, if you could call it that. By 9:45 a.m., my parents, Connor, and a few witnesses from the logistics company had arrived. My mother's face was composed but taut. My father had that same confident air, the one that always suggested he was 2 moves ahead, even when he wasn't. Connor leaned back in his chair, smartphone in hand, fingers tapping lightly. Mercer gave me a nod. I returned it. No words. Not yet. When everyone was seated, he began the formalities, reading aloud the trust structure and the details of the property. I watched their faces carefully. My mother's smile didn't reach her eyes. My father's posture stiffened when Mercer confirmed that the trustee was still the estate's executor and that any attempt to transfer funds without authorization was flagged. Then Mercer gestured to me. "Lucas," he said, "if you will, please present the documentation." I opened the first folder and laid it flat on the table. The screenshot of the bounced lease payment. Date, time, amount, status. I didn't speak. Let the image do the work. My father leaned forward immediately, eyes narrowing. That's just a mistake. It'll clear. I lifted the next folder, spreading spreadsheets, scanned emails, and the notarized trust documents in front of everyone. My grandmother's meticulous annotations, the timelines, the bank statements, all lined up. Every date, every transaction, every communication was accounted for. "No one!" interrupted me. Mercer pulled out a tablet and cued the audio files. My grandmother's voice, steady and deliberate, cut through the room. "Once the house sells, the rest will fall into place. Lucas won't even notice." Then my father's, casual, overconfident, unaware. "Once the house sells, the rest will fall into place. Lucas won't even notice." The recording ended. Silence. I placed the third folder on the table. Receipts from the logistics company showing the frozen account, the unauthorized attempt to redirect funds, the verification request for the trustee. Each piece of evidence was in Mercer's hands and mine. I sat back, waited, quiet. My father's face flushed. My mother's fingers tightened around her notes. Connor looked at the floor. The witnesses exchanged glances, murmuring among themselves. No one said my grandmother's name lightly. No one tried to fabricate explanations. Mercer cleared his throat. The trust was structured precisely to prevent unauthorized interference. Any attempt to redirect funds triggers mandatory disclosure. The attempted transfer into Mr. Parker's father's account was flagged and frozen. Mr. Parker has been managing this property according to his grandmother's instructions. He looked at my parents. The trust instructions were explicit. All financial actions outside of them are invalid. Further attempts will be documented and can have legal consequences. My mother's voice was soft but brittle. Lucas, we thought we were helping. I didn't flinch. I didn't defend myself. I didn't accuse. I let Mercer finish. Connor finally spoke, voice low. Dad.
Mom, this isn't what we thought.
My father stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. Shh, shh. He stopped. He had no words. He realized the evidence was immovable. Concrete. Public. Witnessed. My mother's eyes were damp, not from tears yet, from realization, from understanding that control had slipped from her without her noticing. The witnesses from the logistics company confirmed the account freeze and the attempted redirection. One by one, the details Mercer presented reinforced the impossibility of denial. By the time the meeting ended, my parents were quiet. Connor sat in stunned silence. Mercer gathered his things, gave me a nod, and left. I didn't look back. Outside the office, the winter light was pale, almost neutral. I walked to my car, folder under my arm. Nail followed. No one called. No one tried to bargain. That evening, I returned home, placed the folders in my safe, and finally exhaled. The calm had returned, but it was different now. Not naive calm, calculated calm. The kind that comes from knowing you did what needed to be done without bending yourself to anyone else's version of reality. I called my landlord and confirmed my rent. I opened my bank app and checked my accounts. Balanced, controlled, secure. My grandmother's trust would ensure that. For the first time in a long while, I sat quietly and let myself consider the future. Boundaries weren't just words anymore. They were tangible, documented, and respected. I didn't text my parents. I didn't call. I didn't post anything online. I didn't gloat. That wasn't the point. I poured myself a glass of water, placed the letter from my grandmother next to the folder, and reread the line I had memorized the first day. Do not trust them. I smiled softly to myself, almost imperceptibly, not triumphantly, not bitterly, just acknowledgement. I leaned back, looking around my apartment, noticing the quiet stability in every corner. My grandmother had given me more than a $10 inheritance. She had given me clarity, foresight, and the quiet satisfaction of following through on what she had always trusted me to do. And in that satisfaction, I felt something I hadn't felt before. The slow, deliberate peace of finally reclaiming my own life. The rest, the family dynamics, the past manipulations, the unanswered questions, would continue to unfold naturally, without my interference. My boundaries were set. My life was my own, and I had the patience to let consequences play out exactly as they should. For the first time in years, I wasn't overlooked. Not by my family, not by anyone, I was saying. And it didn't require shouting. It didn't require rage. It only required being quietly, competently, and patiently myself. And that was more than enough.